Hello everyone, this is now the walkthrough through the VSM7 mockup. So this is the vibe-coded output of the implementation of the 7-step methodology from Martin Pfiffner plus some add-ons. So if you are new to the 7 steps, you most likely will also learn a little bit about that, but I won't explain each and every step and each rationale why you do this or that. Collaterally, I will explain a few things, but this will not replace, of course, a full training of Martin Pfiffner. And I will also not explain the VSM in detail because I have explained it in other videos or in other blog posts. So this is really about the software. So the target group, to be honest, are most likely people who know the VSM already and have at least a basic idea what the 7 steps are. And if you are really new to everything, I'm sorry, then yeah, good luck. So what do you see now here? A typical start page, that is the idea. The software is for people who work with a VSM and like to apply the 7-step methodology from Martin, like I said in the beginning. And it should make your life easier. So get rid of all these PowerPoints, Excel files, Word stuff, and then all the risks that are inherently connected to using these happy islands of Microsoft Office artifacts. So you usually develop things, then you have to copy and paste them. It's a lot of manual work, and I wanted to get rid of that. And coming now from my practitioner point of view, this is the implementation I was always dreaming of. And yeah, uh, also a shout out here at this point in time to Arseny Krasikov. This is the fellow who will build the real implementation. So also be aware that probably the final look will be different compared to here this appearance. This is a typical wipe code output from Codex with here and there some code also involved. But the implemented version will look different. However, the functionality will be the same or even more improved because, as you might expect, no? It's an iterative process and things are moving forward. So this is maybe something like a minimal viable product. All right, now let's walk through the software and start here with a project that I have already almost completely filled out. You start with a typical project, a start page. In the moment it's relatively boring. It's just a little bit information about the project as such. What is my organization that I'm looking at? What are the customers and stakeholders, the purpose, etc. pp. So nothing wild. And you get at least a little overview how many of the famous success critical tasks you have already in the system, how many of them are mapped, and how many roles do you have here. So expect that this page probably will move on, but honestly I have not invested too much energy into it because I wanted to directly implement the 7 steps. Start with the 7 steps. Here is step number 1, the definition of your operative units, and at the end of the day then defining what is your primary steering dimension for your system in focus. So, and actually step 1 is divided here into 5 sub-steps. In the beginning, you have to decide which part of a huge organization or the total organization I'm looking at. So what is my system in focus? And you find here already some information also from the previous slide. And then the recursion levels. So what are the structures, the value producing structures that are nested into each other? And here you can see that you can add the typical recursion levels. So our system focuses the AI business sector. Our +1 is the headquarter. Below the business sector, we have AI products as a recursion level. And in the project, then AI feature teams. So it's a fairly simple structure. One tweak coming from experience, sometimes you have the situation that on the same recursion level, you have neighboring organizations that you have to take into account in your steering model. For instance, because you have an extremely high level of operational dependencies. And therefore, here just as an example, you could add also on the same recursion level another organizational entity, whatever it might be. I mean, the best, of course, also another operative system. All right, and it's automatically saved here in this example. So let's move on with the segmentation options. For the ones who are familiar with the 7 steps, the crucial question, what ideas do I have to steer my business, e.g. by regions, or rather a functional approach, or do I want to have a product organization? And I've already, with my system and focus and the recursion level, somehow I'm pointing towards a product organization. That is at least the current reality. And with these options, I want to come up with other ideas. Yeah? Maybe I see also a better potential to drive my business from a regional point of view. And as you can imagine, this is really a fundamental difference if I have a product focused organization or an organization that is rather built around the needs of regions and all the other implications. Okay, then one of the strengths of the 7-step framework, I really love it, the famous key buying criteria. So you step into the shoes now of your customers and yeah, write down your criteria. For the ones who are familiar with the methodology, you know it. Classically, you have either maybe a PowerPoint slide or you do it in Excel and go through all the different fields and options that you can here select. And then after the key buying criteria, so the customer perspective, we of course incorporate also the long-term perspective, the rather strategic fields of action or strategic direction or the 6-pack of control. This animal has many names, but at the end of the day, besides the classic view on the from the customer perspective, here we want to incorporate, of course, the strategy, the strategic perspective, rather long-term oriented. This is defined here by the 6-pack of control from Gailweiler. So what are the variables that you have to have under control in order to be also in the long run viable, successful? So, and this is then what is the market position, the innovation, productivity, attractiveness for good people, profitability, and liquidity / cash flow. And for each of these variables, you write down now, as you would also in the real world, using the methodology, your statements, your targets, your goals, your descriptions, and also here in the software, the possibility either maybe you want to add a link to an internal SharePoint, or you maybe have certain files, more details, market analysis or something like that, and then you could also attach that here for each variable. Then we have everything in place that we can finally come to the evaluation. So the question, what is now the best steering dimension? What makes the most sense? And here you see now what you have usually done either on a whiteboard or with the help of an Excel file. You have here the key buying criteria that you have defined, plus here then the respective, what is it called, 6-pack of control, the variables of success, and then you go line by line through each of your segmentation options. Oh yeah, and I changed something in between, so I have to fix it here. That's why we have here non-selected fields. And this is now just a wild example how I can define now line per line, row per row, to which extent would it be helpful to be segmented either regional, functional, or per product to bring, for instance, the key buying criteria of quality to life, to manage it in the best way. And then at the end, ta-da, of course, you get your result. On the one hand, the unweighted result plus the weighted result for the key buying criteria that can help you to make then a decision. What is very important, I mean, for the ones who are applying this methodology, it's not about having now a perfect number. Yeah? It's not about a quantification, it's about an evaluation. So it's an assessment, of course. You use common sense. Then you choose and document here your preferred segmentation option and also decision rationale. And then finally, you are able to define the operative units that you want to steer then and create, so to say, the steering body. That means from system 2 to system 5 around these operative units. Yeah, and here you can enter them, and then we move directly forward to the next step, which is the question, is now this construct with these 5 operative units actually manageable? And can we live with the structure? And little spoiler up front, 5 units is actually this almost too perfect, one could say, because most likely they could be very well manageable. Then you go into the assessment, and here Ashby's law and the idea of variety comes into the game. The first law of cybernetics, I dare to claim. And you, on the one hand, in the model assess the horizontal variety, doing this by the amount of operative units, the similarity, plus the question about how well are they able to control themselves. And you do this here on a slider, and you see that then the this little marker is reacting and showing you where's actually the middle. And looking at this, I see actually a bug. Green should be in the middle and the red on the other side. But anyways, it's just a mock-up. This is a perfect example how we will, of course, Arseni and me, develop it further and further. But here, this should be rather intuitive and help you then to assess the variety on the horizontal axis that you expect. And then you have on the other hand the so-called vertical variety. So everything that is related to steering now these operative units. And again, here this is also reacting. It's a mixed calculation that is then balancing out how this whole thing is reacting. Afterwards, you do your assessment, and you get also here then a result, and you see that you're actually not in the green zone, in this fit zone. That's actually how it should look like also in the other markers anyways. And it gives you also an indication for step 3. Here are things not in balance, and we have a variety fit gap, and it's proposing already a signal what you need to bring into control, or what you could do now in order to bring it back into a balance. And don't nail me now down here to the specifics of this example. This is just a white slider. The thing is, usually when you bring it here, as you can see, in the extreme values, then things can would change. Let me show it. Maybe one example here up. Let's say we have really we say for us this is really large. Okay, nothing is happening because we are still here in the green zone, and that is actually still manageable. But let's say the similarity is big, and we have many of them. Then you see that here the new proposals are automatically generated. Of course, like always, the intelligence is at least here still in front of the screen. That means you have to interpret the signals by yourself and decide if it's relevant for you or not, like in the real world and in the application. So this is a conscious decision that the software will not design this for you. Then when you have done your assessment and you have your result, then you maybe anticipate already certain steering challenges. So this is then the second step, not stack, step. And you can write it down. You have different options. You can select it, and you can already here also maybe integrate further information that helps you to assess and to make clear why you decide to take this option, even though it takes longer than, for instance, the upper option. The one thing was I could strengthen the control functions or increase the capacity for self-steering of the operative units. And I believe that, and this is my inner conviction now, depends of course totally on the context, but here in this case I believe that it's more sustainable to invest into developing this capacity. And also one thing that is interesting later on in the implementation here on the left hand side, that this will be then automatically generated as a potential task for a transformation backlog. So that is also a big difference to using the world of PowerPoint, Excel, and so on, that each information that might be relevant in another later step will be treated then accordingly and will then appear in this context. So we have, in quotes, a real database under the hood and not this, oral narrative tradition in our big corporate systems of telling us stories with PowerPoints. No, we have here data that can be really used. One could say this is the master data of the digital twin of the organization. But that sounds very much like a marketing slogan, so let's focus and come back to the third step, the success critical task. Here, perfect example. You see here certain inputs already for the SCTs coming either from the segmentation, and here this is from the six-pack of control, an indicator that maybe we have to take care about that. Again, we decide if this is relevant or not for us. Plus from the step 2 manageability question also here this task now reappears, because obviously that should somehow be something that we take care of and that it then is treated as a success critical task. Having said that, then this is rather boring still in the moment. By the book, the question is now with the VSM, I observe here different complexity drivers, for instance, between environment and operation, or we have the connection between the operation and the management, and so on. And you can take down here your notes. This is rather an exercise that you can then should help you to get a feeling which kind of success critical task I actually need for my system. The general heuristic around 20 to 30 is a good practice, and here you see already a pre-filled list of success critical tasks with all aspects that these people, usually in a workshop setting, come up with. And I dare to claim also this is one of the wonderful inventions. These SCTs are, for me, really the heart of developing a proper steering system. I couldn't talk about this for ages, but not today. Just wanted to demonstrate to you that you are able here, of course, now to go into the details of a task. You can set a priority because, to be honest, just because people are coming up with the idea of we have to take care about innovation, but maybe you're rather in the moment in a phase where you have to survive in the short term, and then you can say, okay, of course I will take care of innovation, it's important, but maybe priority B and not A, or maybe partner management or other topics that you could downgrade. Still, of course, it's an important task. And then you see also coming from practice, because you talk with people, it's a sense-making process. It takes a while. You could also split a task if you want, or later on you can also merge a task and put them together. So that is then, here you see the task is splitted, and I could now select two tasks and make them one. I leave it here for the moment. Just wanted to show you, of course, also these little its and bits and tiny things are also integrated into the logic, because it's not a static thing, and actually it's good also in my perspective that SCTs are discussed or are changing, because that implies that they are discussed, they are alive, people are taking it serious. Few filter options, of course, here also included. We'll see how we will develop this further. So then you have your SCTs, and now comes the important questions of a question of what do we do centrally in the system, so in the overarching steering body, and what will be done decentrally in the operative units. Here's also a short indicator or help, I don't know, like a little cheat sheet for the three central questions in this context. And now you see you are able to fill it out, and since I added in the beginning a new recursion level called another sector, of course here this now suddenly appears and is empty, logical. So you see how the system is really building on each other and referring on all the information and data objects inside of this tool. And now you can really do one of the wonderful steps. Now you have your success critical task, and now you decompose it on the different recursion levels, and then you can define also who is accountable in the context of the whole system and the driver of a topic. And of course, very important maybe for the VSM nerds that are listening or still listening, that of course, for instance, the topic of strategy must be alive on every recursion level. However, for the coherence of the system, it makes sense that I have just one A on a certain recursion level, so I know who's the pacemaker. And that does not mean that always, for instance, it needs to be here on the corporate level or in the business sector level. I could also theoretically say here for business strategy, for example, it's coming bottom up from the AI products. But you can imagine that having such a discussion really is a painful but hopefully insightful process that helps to clarify who is responsible for what in terms of the recursion level. We're not talking now about roles or the org chart. It's really just the recursion level logic that we now want to apply to get clarity here in the system when we organize something. Then step 4, here already prepared. Ta-da! You see now also finally for the first time the VSM in all its beauty with a, let's say, standard coloring, how I learned it from Martin. And I really like it, and I admit I would love to see it establishing somehow as a standard, because with the colors also later on you can use it as a color code in other contexts and so on. Very helpful. Here you see already that I have mapped on the VSM. I click now on System 5, for instance, 3 tasks. So this is here the exercise on the left hand side. Usually you see here SCTs, and via drag and drop I can map them to a certain system, or here out of convenience the button already is appearing, because normative management is obviously a task for System 5. Yeah, and you see by the way also the split task that we created before. And this is now a little filter option, drag and drop logic. I can click through, see now which task is put to which level. And also maybe a small detail. The pure doctrines says that we don't have success critical tasks that somehow are related to operative units, so the S1s. So usually we say we treat our operative units as black boxes because they are self-organized, and I really like it. But again, coming from praxis and my pain, that I do not always have the time in my projects to always discuss the theory, I allow them also to include, and this is here the switch, this is the doctrine, twinkle twinkle Martin, and here pragmatic, include also operative S1 tasks, because sometimes people cannot grasp the full system without describing also operative tasks, and then I allow it to them, and for me it's okay. As long as they are aware that these are operative tasks, they belong actually to the operative units, and don't mix this with the overarching steering tasks. And as long as we make this distinction, and you do it here automatically when you map also tasks, or would map tasks also here to an operative system, so that is basically fine for me. And then last but not least, you see here also the distribution of the tasks across the systems, and that is sometimes also for me an interesting information to decide, do we have maybe too much or too little tasks in a certain system? But here this is now constructed in a way that we are dealing here with a sector, and in this context I said it's okay, maybe we need a little bit less strategic tasks. Maybe this is a little bit too much compared to the operative. This is not so well balanced, and one could say, also here S2 9%, is this enough for the coordination / self-coordination of the system? And I mean, you all know the story probably from praxis with F3 star, the unloved child, the one where you always has to a little bit fight for. Anyways, then now we have the steering system constructed, the drag and drop is done, the allocation has happened. Then in the next step, the question of the channels arise. And here you see now a major change to the typical methodology how Martin has described it in his book, because coming again from praxis, it's good that we have the SCTs, it's cool that we have allocated the accountability on the recursion level. However, still people need to understand how it is actually working. And here now a process view comes into the game, and this is actually, one could say, one of the dimensions of the organization. So steering, number one, where the VSM is very strong in. The other is the process dimension, so something like that. And then the third one would be the typical structure in terms of, in German we call it Aufbauorganisation, the hierarchical order in the organization and accountability. And I learned that it really helps people if they now can take success critical tasks here and deconstruct them step by step to understand how the work is flowing through the system. And this is super generic still. However, since we follow the Pareto principle when applying the VSM and the 7 steps, and we work from the rough picture into the detail, it's totally fine if this is maybe a relatively high level still. It helps to create notes. You can have hints or findings that you can include here. So this is actually relatively neat. For instance, I say here, okay, I mark here a finding. I see here already a capacity gap, and I think it will be really high, and I write something about it as a note. And then this finding will be also automatically transferred to the later or will be then a candidate for the transformation backlog, so let's put it like that, in the implementation section. So the information is reused. And I can also change here, for instance, the layer, but of course I can do also this here manually by doing a drag and drop. So this is really then a little process editor, a simple one. And of course, again, coming from praxis, doing a complete robustness check for each and every SCT is crazy, because usually people know where do we have the neurologic points and where do we have to take care of. So of course you focus only then on the steps, success critical tasks that are relevant for you. And now you see here you have a little editor, can connect things easily, and again mark here a finding, do things. That is pretty neat. Also what is interesting, you see it here, I can relate also a process of a success critical task to other SCTs, because for instance you can say that your financial planning is connected to your strategy process, and your strategy process again is driving the portfolio process, just as an example. And these SCTs are connected, and you can also reflect this here. So there's the option, I have to admit I forgot actually how it works. How can I add here another SCT? Ah, damn it. This is funny. I built so much that I already forgot what I have done somehow. Irony here, this is how it's working. I can click here, and then I could, for instance, connect this manage innovation with normative management. Yeah, that's how it works. I just click here in the drop down the respective SCT. Yeah, so then you go through this sense making exercise again, and you see also the related SCTs, and could also here drag and drop, and you see also elements and connect them, and you see also from which SCT it's coming, so that you have a wider view. Of course, it's not that super funky. That's now every step between all the SCTs is synchronized. That is maybe a task for one day, that you really ensure that each object exists only once. Here it's a little bit more, like I said before, sense making as is the exercise that we're doing here. Okay, then after having run now through the details, yeah, and also crossing the boundary between steering and process, it's time to use again the original communication variety checks that you can find also in Martin's book. And hooray, also the VSM is again here. And here now you can explore each of the loop within the VSM and decide how well is the channel able to handle variety in terms of capacity. So can it carry enough variety in time? Yeah, byte per second in quotes. The clarity, is it understood? Especially this is related to the transducers in the VSM. Then the timeliness, so is it arriving at the right point in time, synchronicity, and feedback in terms of is the loop closed or is this an open loop? And as we all know, open loops tend to escalate. So we also want to ask this question. Yeah, and then you get at the end also here an assessment, and already you can also write down the first ideas for the loop in the detail. These information then will be used in the next step. But that's it actually for step 6. Moving on to step 7, the representation. Now we bring all the, in quotes, magic stuff to the surface and make the organization understandable, especially also for people who don't know the VSM and all the decisions behind it when you do the definition of the operative units, the manageability, and so on. This is very cybernetic, pretty nerdy stuff, but now we make it accessible also for people who are not familiar with the VSM. And at first, and this is now, I hope Martin will like it, my interpretation on step 7, I think it's very close to your approach. And in our big project, you know what I mean, we had to make many compromises. Here I wanted to really do it right. So prevent to draw the organizational charts too early, especially when you're in a transition or transformation, because once you have done this, actually the energy in the organization to change anything and define more the organization is gone. That's why we should always postpone it as much as possible. And as you can see here, then also this is really reflected, step 7.7. So really just in the end, we see a hierarchy. So step 1, we need to define the organizational vessels. So in quotes, these are the glasses in which we can fill then our SCTs, and that could be the roles in the system or functions and departments, and typically meetings and committees. And for the people who say, hey Mark, but what about agentic AI? Then I would say, all good, at least for the time being. I would treat AI as a role, equivalent to a human, I have to say. And I can, of course, describe this role and define what it can do, what are the boundaries of a role, and so on. And that could be either an agent or maybe a swarm of agents. That depends, of course, on a use case. So technically, it's easy possible just by using this twist to integrate, of course, agentic also into your steering model. All right, and yeah, you see here a long list. UI-wise, this is not the most sexiest solution. Probably it needs also a little bit more tweaking, but for the time being, it's good enough. And I tested it also using, from my experience, how many roles do I usually have in a project, functions. Maybe the meetings are a little bit too little, but anyways, they are there. And yeah, adding then a vessel is super simple. You have the can also switch here, by the way, the vessel type. You give it a name, a purpose. Usually it's for R0, but sometimes you have situations also coming from praxis where you want to connect it to other units or recursion levels, and that is possible. And you can also make the distinction between is it a candidate or accepted, and also here a bit VSM nerdiness. You can also define this role has an escalation right. If you want to really consciously design your algedonic system, which is usually also treated like as 3-star, like the unwanted child. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because it's so important. Yeah, Then, how to move on? We have now the vessels defined, and now drum loop. We come also to one of the coolest steps, in my opinion, in the VSM, even though it's sometimes really painstaking. That means now allocating along the SCTs either roles, functions, or meetings, and allocating the RASIC or applying the RASIC logic. So who is responsible, accountable, and so on. The UI is here super simple. You can here click through and, oh, danger, we have 2 times an A, 2 times someone is accountable. Meep, meep, we don't want that. So you get a little warning. And of course, again, coming from praxis, of course, sometimes we have the situation that maybe a role and a committee together are marked as accountable, because that's something that makes sense for the organization, even though we don't like the 2 A's. Nevertheless, it's about reality and not about theoretical beauty. Therefore, it is possible, but it should be an exception. That's what also then the warning is saying here, exactly. And also actually a nice effect. You see here that I clicked now in this field, therefore this SCT number 1 is selected, and you see already here also then in the list which roles or meetings are assigned here to this SCT to bring it to life, to maintain it. Plus I get some warnings or hints. Maybe I should change this to hints and not warning, because that sounds too big for what it is. Yeah, and then you go here through this exercise. As the practitioners know, super painstaking, but oh my god, it really helps. Yeah, and to make it also better workable, we will have later on a full screen mode here will be implemented. Plus, of course, I can focus on my systems or on my scope. I can theoretically also look on other recursion levels or the vessel types. So there is also some filtering options are included. Then we are almost done. Here we have step number 3, now about metrics, artifacts, and tools. So this is a little addition from my side again, because I think it is really helpful when I think anyhow about SCTs, and this is somehow also my main or leading design philosophy or object, whatever. Then let's map also along the SCTs either the metrics that I need in the system, or maybe certain artifacts and result types, or tools and methods. And here in business strategy I have filled it already a little bit. So customer satisfaction, EBIT, TNS, and FCF from a business strategy. For instance, in this example, the metrics that I would like to track, and I can also define a target, the frequency, how often I want to measure it, and from where do I get it. And this is now the cool thing that I have also here included other artifacts. Here these are the tools. So a tool could, for instance, deliver an KPI. So you see here also in step 7 the ambition to really have a smart, again, way to represent master data of the digital twin of an organization, in order to be able really to find in every context and all possible questions that you might have the right answer. Data-based, the truest meaning of the word. And also when I add something here, at first things are always proposed what I already have in the system, so that I don't have these double entries and redundancies, but I would be of course able also to include here simple KPIs, and not to forget also the owner question, because nice that we have data, we know where we get it, but who is now really in charge of it? And this is of course also here part of the concept. Yeah, same applies then, also the same logic here for the artifact result types and tools and methods. Shout out to Simon Wortley. Yeah, having said that, then we can jump into the details of the role descriptions. This page is now partially, of course, already pre-aggregated because the related SCTs are here represented, and that already helps me now to develop also the role descriptions, yeah, because we used this SCT logic. I have already assigned this role also to certain meetings. That's why also the meetings are here part of it. But I could also add a new meeting or select one that already exists in the system. The same applies then for the inherited metrics and KPIs, which are related to the SCTs. Yeah? Simple game plus artifacts result types, which are then also here inherited, but I could also delete them on role level because maybe just because it's automatically transferred in praxis in your context, it would make no sense. So it stays flexible, and I can also always add something role specific if I want it. Yes, then the same logic applies for the functional descriptions, same game, but the meters and agendas is then again an animal of its own that needs also a little bit more tweaking, but I think for the time being it's good enough, because what can I do? Let me maybe do it this way. I can define at first, okay, I have here a meeting, I can click through, and now I have from the RASIC already the allocation that this meeting, for instance, is allocated or connected to this success critical task, but of course I could also add SCTs here in this context, and that will then have an impact, of course, on the RASIC at the same time. Yeah, things are smartly connected in the background. I can define who are the participants. Here you see already the proposals, and just by clicking on a row, on a person, or on a role, I can add it, and I can also define the role in the meeting. Yeah, is it a contributor, a decision maker, the chair of the meeting, and so on. Then the agenda indeed is still in the moment still freestyle. I can say, okay, from where do I get inputs from this meeting, and that could be other meetings or other artifacts, elements that I have here already integrated in my system. The same applies for the output. Am I applying an output, creating an output? Where do I, for instance, are my decisions flowing to another meeting? That could be seen. I could also enter here again the tools, metrics, KPIs, plus what's also new, the decision rights, of course, related to the SCT, but I can also add further decision rights. Theoretically, I should have also an overview who is actually in charge of what in terms of deciding, because this is also sometimes a very interesting question. Plus nerd level galore, of course, I could also relate this also to the loops in order to have then a holistic overview for the VSM. And then last but not least, I could also create here an information path, or information regarding the algedonics if I need an escalation. Yeah, and of course, very important here at this point of time, the idea is that you later are able to export everything, not only in Word, but of course also PowerPoint, Excel, depending on what type of data we actually have and what makes most sense in terms of the file format. And of course you can download the whole project as a book when you, if you like, so a full documentation. You can download it on step level or even on this detail level. And here you see the detail level. And then drum loop, finally, then we have here the view that everybody wants to see, typically. So the Aufbauorganisation, the structure, this is then generated from the departments plus the operative units, and you could also then here play with the roles and allocate roles, do this with drag and drop. But this will be also later on not super sophisticated. I mean, it will be good enough to build a structure, and you can add sub-functions, and they will then, of course, reappear in the organizational vessels from the beginning of this step, and so on. But there's not the ambition now to replace a fully HR system that is most likely existing. So it will help you with the first steps, but then also from experience, probably then you download the PPT and work in PowerPoint, because that's the reality. Then drum loop, very last feature, and then we are done with this walkthrough. the VSM cockpit function. And here you see really now a super rough, simple first sketch. So the already seen visualization of the VSM, and then I can filter and focus per click on a system. What kind of SCTs do I have now here in the system? Which steering meetings, which KPIs, artifacts and tools, quality artifacts, who is accountable for the success of the system. So you see also, if you like, the team on VSM level that is in charge to maintain a good system for, plus the channel health coming from step 6.2. Also this information is reused, again an example how this metadata shall reappear in the context where it makes sense and that we have it only once. And then maybe one example, totally unnecessary still, I couldn't resist to build also a 3D visualization of the VSM with some moving thingies. It has still a high anti-alias. I have not really tweaked it so much because this is really just a show effect, and one could question if or how high the value is to be able to move here around. Maybe one day someone has a cool idea how to make use out of a 3D VSM besides the show effect. Yeah, unbelievable. If you are still listening or watching, then kudos, thanks, and we keep you in the loop. I hope that makes sense to you and was at least a little bit of fun. Bye bye.